Well, thank the choir for leading us in worship today. Thank you so much for that great message on Easter. And also want to thank our leaders and musicians. Catherine Tilson does such a great job on the organ and piano for us every single week. And I also want to thank Barbara for all of her hard work as our choir director. The amount of time that she puts into choosing music and helping us to practice. And we are a hard group to wrangle, so she does a great job with that every week. And we just thank Barbara so much for all that she does for our church. The title of today's sermon is, Do You Believe in Easter? And I invite you to hear these words from Luke's Gospel, chapter 24, verses 1 through 12. But on the first day of the week, at early dawn, they came to the tomb, taking the spices that they had prepared. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb, but when they went in, they did not find the body. While they were perplexed about this, suddenly 2 men in dazzling clothes stood beside them. And the women were terrified and bowed their faces to the ground. But the men said to them, Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here, but has risen. Remember how he told you, while he was still in Galilee, that the Son of Man must be handed over to sinners and be crucified, and on the third day rise again. Then they remembered his words, and returning from the tomb, they told all this to the 11 and to all the rest. Now, it was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the other women with them who told this to the apostles. But these words seemed to them an idle tale, and they did not believe them. But Peter got up and ran to the tomb. Stooping and looking in, he saw the linen cloths by themselves. And then he went home, amazed at what had happened. So I heard about a town in Connecticut that was discussing the idea of canceling their annual Easter egg hunt. This community egg hunt was a big deal every year. It had gone on for years and years. It was the highlight of the year for that community. They would hide something like 9,000 Easter eggs for the kids to find, and they always had a big time there. Well, why in the world would they think about calling something like that off? Why would they want to cancel such an event? The organizer said that the event in previous years was starting to go off the rails. At the previous year's egg hunt, things really turned dark as they said that parents rushed the field and took everything before the kids, behaving like locusts. Adults broke the rules and just ran out there and got all the eggs before the kids. I guess it really was every man, woman, and child for themselves at the egg hunt. Well, this left little 4-year-old Vincent Welch in tears. When he was interviewed by the local NBC affiliate, he said this. He said, Somebody pushed me over and took my eggs, and it's very rude of them, and they broke my bucket. Isn't that like the saddest thing you've ever heard before in your life? I promise you, that was not written about me at our church egg hunt. I was not pushing over any kids to get those eggs. But isn't that unbelievable? Maybe it's not so unbelievable in the current world and climate that we're living in right now. I mean, is that what Easter has turned into? Adults trampling over children to get candy, to get their eggs. Adults pushing over kids so that they can get the prize egg. I guess if it's got a lot of money in it, it might be worth it, right? I dare say that we have missed the point, don't you? And Jack, just what is that point exactly? I love opening lines in books. And one of my favorite opening lines is from Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. It says, Marley was dead to begin with. There is no doubt whatever about this. Jesus was dead. There is no doubt whatever about this. And we have to get that right first before we can understand the rest of the story. Jesus was dead. All hope was lost. He was locked away in the tomb forever. But then 3 days later, here come the women approaching the tomb. The stone was rolled away, and there was no body to be found. Luke tells us that they were perplexed about this, which is a nice way of saying that they were at a loss for words. A perfectly reasonable feeling to the situation, right? It's completely understandable that they would feel this way. I mean, I would have been right there with them thinking, what in the world is going on? What is happening here? You see, these women were no dummies. They knew, just like we know, that dead people stay dead. They were not expecting to find what they found. There was no game plan to go down there and say, hey, let's just head down to the tomb and we'll tell people that we couldn't find Jesus and we'll make up this big story. Notice that the empty tomb in and of itself is not enough to convince the women. Seeing the empty tomb without the body of Jesus, they still can't put it all together just yet. And that tells me today that knowing all the facts of Easter is not enough. There has to be more. There has to be another step that we have to take. Suddenly the women realize that they're not alone. Angels glowing like lightning are there with them, saying, why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here, but has risen. In other words, you're looking for Jesus in the wrong place. He's not locked away in the grave anymore. He's out there. He's unleashed. He's on the move. And folks, that is the point of Easter. That is what we are here to celebrate this day. If you showed up here today expecting to hear a nice message about bunnies and eggs and spring and flowers, you've come to the wrong place. I love all that stuff, I really do. But today, we're here to talk about the message of resurrection. God raised the dead Jesus from the grave. A vindication, an acquittal, a validation of all that Jesus taught and stood for and died for. A confirmation from God that says, oh, by the way, listen to him because he is my beloved. Angels continue with that word, remember. Over to be crucified, and then on the third day he would rise again. Look at us. Then they remembered his words. It all came rushing back to them. Of course, this is what he said. He said this was going to happen. He told us. We didn't understand, but he told us. Well, judging by what we see next, this act of remembering changed these women forever. In remembering the words of Jesus, they finally understood what the empty tomb meant. It all came together, pointing to this one thing, that Jesus was alive again. Death could not hold him down. God had raised Jesus to new life in a resurrected body. And when they realize this, they do not stop off to go to the market or to go to Sunday brunch or to go back home and do. No, they go so that they can tell someone else about it. They leave that place to go and spread the word. They become witnesses to the good news. They head back to the disciples without the angels telling them to do so, and they told everything that they had experienced there. These women became the first preachers of the Easter story, right? It's pretty cool. Then Luke tells us about the response of the disciples. Did you catch this? It says, but these words seemed to them an idle tale, and they did not believe them. Or as the NIV says, they did not believe the women because their words seemed to them like nonsense. Now, maybe the disciples were just of the mind, as we modern people are today, that as powerful as God is, there's just stuff that God can't even do himself. Maybe they thought that there were some things that were too big, too powerful for God. I mean, dead is dead, right? Death had won. Jesus had lost. That's the end of the story. But as the great writer Frederick Buechner once said, he said, resurrection means that is never the last thing. Runs to the tomb. He sees the same thing that the women saw. Empty tomb, no body, the burial cloth lying off to the side. It doesn't say that he believed at first. It doesn't say that the light came on for him just yet. Unlike the women, he does not return home full of excitement to tell everybody what he's seen. Instead, he returns home amazed and wondering at what had happened. Isn't that kind of what the message of resurrection does to us today? It sends us home a little stunned, a little confused, a little perplexed, amazed, wondering at what this all means, because it forces us to rethink everything that we've ever known. It makes us look at God more closely and say, is this really possible? Are you really out there, and are you really this powerful? I think that we would rather not ask questions like that. We would rather not reflect on anything big, the big questions of life like that, something that we can't control. So we just keep on living our lives, kind of giving Easter a nod here and there every year with flowers and candy and bonies and a trip to church. But what if today we really stop to think, is it true? What if God really is here? And what if God really did raise Jesus from the dead? What would that mean for my life? How would my world change? N.T. Wright was a former bishop of the Church of England. He tells a story about one day when he missed the train and he was fed up and tired, so he had to go flag down a taxi in London, and he was dressed much like he would be dressed for a Sunday morning worship service. And the cab driver asked him, he said, "Hey, are you a priest?" And Wright said, "Well, sort of. I'm actually a bishop in the Church of England." And the cab driver replied, he said, "Well, I'm raised Catholic." And Wright nodded with approval at that. And then the man said, "Are you the ones who are still having problems with women becoming bishops?" And Wright said, "Well, yeah, we are kind of discussing a lot of that right now." And the taxi driver thought about that for a second. And then he answered with this. He said, "Well, here's what I have to say about it." He said, "If God raised Jesus Christ from the dead, then everything else is basically rock and roll." That stuck with me ever since I heard it. I think he's right. What the cab driver was saying was that if Jesus has been raised from the dead, all bets are off, because we live in a brand new world now. The new creation has broken into our world through the risen Jesus. And it's a new world of redemption and love and forgiveness and new creation and peace and God's kingdom reigning forever. And guess what, y'all? We are all invited to be a part of it. We all receive the invitation. We're all summoned to join up. We are all beckoned to follow Him. Well, Jack, that sounds nice, but what do we do next? We want to be a part of this. We do. What are we supposed to do next? Well, it's really simple, yet it's difficult at the same time. We say yes to God's acceptance of us. We enjoy God's love made real to us in Jesus Christ. We join our lives to Jesus. We turn from our sin and we die to ourselves. And then get this. The same God who raised Jesus from the dead promises to give us new life as well. As the Apostle Paul says in Romans 8:11, "If the Spirit of Him who raised Jesus from the dead dwells in you, He who raised Christ from the dead will give life to your mortal bodies also, through His Spirit that dwells in you." Church, hear me today. New life and renewal and transformation and change, these are not just some things that happened a long time ago near the tomb of Jesus. No, they are happening right here and right now in this place, all pointing forward to the resurrection of our own physical bodies, just like Jesus in the world to come. With the resurrection, we know that Jesus is on the move in our world. We know that Jesus is let loose. He's unleashed. He's set free. He's no longer confined in the grave. And He's come to bring us life. Jesus is still out there. He's still in here. He's working everywhere to bring people to Himself. And we are all invited to join in His work of bringing God's love to the rest of the world. If you came here this morning hoping to bring your spices, looking to mourn a dead Jesus, why do you look for the living among the dead? Jesus is alive. It's a whole new world, y'all. This is just rock and roll. Everything about how the world works, that's all been turned upside down now. Turned upside down by this God who resurrects what was once dead, who transforms what was once broken and sinful and lost and alone, who takes what was tossed to the side and turns it into something beautiful. Who is amazing lives today. This is no idle tale. This is no nonsense. It is the gospel of Jesus. And just like the women who experienced it, as we remember today, we want to make the good news known to the rest of the world too. We want to announce it to our friends, our families, our neighbors, our coworkers, the whole world. And let me tell you what has happened. You got to hear about this. Easter has changed my life. I can't believe it. Jesus has transformed my world, and He wants you to. There was once a lady named Edith Burns who was an elderly widow who loved Jesus Christ with all of her heart. She would love to sit down with somebody and say, "Hello, my name is Edith Burns. Do you believe in Easter?" Believing in Easter was her way of saying, do you believe in Jesus Christ as your Lord? Do you believe in the resurrection? Well, one day a physician brought her the bad news of cancer. And Edith replied, she said, "Doc, don't look so sad. I've had a full life, and now you're telling me I'm going to see my Jesus face to face. I'll be reunited with my dear husband and my parents and so many old friends." The cancer began to take hold of her body, and she entered the hospital, and everyone was drawn to Miss Edith. And if she ever got the chance, she would say to the nurses and the doctors and the technicians, she would say, "Hello, my name is Edith Burns. Do you believe in Easter?" There was one nurse in the hospital who was not drawn to Miss Edith. Her name was Phyllis Cross, and she was mean. She had a tough life. There was not much joy in her bones. You know the type. One day, Phyllis had to go check on Miss Edith. And Edith said, "Phyllis, you know, God loves you. I love you. I've been..." And Phyllis, you can stop that right now. You can stop praying. Interested. I've asked God to not let me go home until you've come into His family. And Phyllis replied, "Well, then you're going to be here for a long time, because that's..." Edith decided that she would not ask Phyllis if she believed in Easter like she did everyone else. And so one day Phyllis finally came to her and she said, "Edith, you know, why have you never asked me why I believe or if I believe in Easter?" Edith smiled and she said, "Well, I asked God to tell you to come to me and ask me about the Easter question yourself, and you just did." And Phyllis was caught off by that. Edith began to share the good news about Jesus with her, and this mean old army nurse invited Jesus into her heart right then and there as her Savior. 2 days later, Phyllis came into Edith's room, but Edith was no longer there. She had a peaceful smile on her face, but she had gone to be with Jesus. Phyllis placed her hands on Edith. She said, "Happy Easter, my dear," knowing full well that she was with Jesus now. Several hours later, Phyllis had a break. She went to go get some coffee. One of the new nursing students happened to be in there. Phyllis sat down beside her. She said, "Hello, dear. My name is Phyllis Cross. Do you believe in Easter?" Hawkinsville First, isn't transformation amazing? Isn't new life amazing? Isn't the resurrection out of this world amazing? Yes. My life. Jesus has transformed my world, and He wants to do the same for you. So, my name is Jack Varnell. You believe in Easter. Thanks be to God. Amen.